Hi, Chad.
Hello, Norris. How are you?
Hello, Jan. My God, Chad, you do look well rested.
Who's well rested?
Well, Chad said, he slept for 10 hours.
I hear that only lasts for a couple of days.
Just hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us? Not so much.
I was joking
1, 2.
that you looked well rested, whether you actually are or not. But we're glad you got your rest. I can hear you, Chad.
Cool. I can hear you.
Not a great loss.
And look, Jen, it looks like you're seeing all the behind the scenes kind of stuff. It's dangerous, twisty stuff.
Yeah, Jen, just run away now. It's only going to get worse.
Uh-oh. I don't know what to expect now.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, more fun.
Michael, you're supposed to keep these people in line.
We actually can see Michael.
Yes. I like the big banner behind you. That looks really cool. Did you like get this created just for us?
Let me remember who won the national championship. That's what it does.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
So are we giving everybody a couple of minutes before we get started? Chad, did you get a haircut?
No.
No? Okay.
He has to rotate his hats though.
I worry about you, Chad. It's the New York Met fan in me that keeps seeing that Yankees cap pop up. We're gonna need to do something about that. Thank you.
Well, I was hoping to
Christina.
wear, we should have all worn our Houston Astros hat just to annoy him. But
Oh my gosh, Norris.
Rose had the Red Sox. Red Sox is definitely a good one for the permanent grandkids.
While we're waiting for people to sign on, Eric, Norris, or Chad, do you have a good popcorn question?
We kicked one around. I think Chad had the last iteration of it.
I can do that. And we're looking at doing something kind of related to what we're talking about today. So one of the things that we're going to have a chat about today is along the lines of things that are important to the ecosystem, things that we think are critical. So maybe just going around top of mind based on your experience, who you are, what you do, and what is the one thing, if you think back of the last, say, 6 months, what is one thing in 5 words or less that has been really important, critical to the success of your ecosystem? One thing. So think back over the last, say, 6 months or so, something that you've been involved in. Is it something about people? Is it something about, say, investment? Is it roles, government? It could be tied to a story. Just briefly, one thing in about 5 words or less. And so we might start off with Norris.
The one guy who was impossible to say things in 5 words or less, but founding of new Idaho Women's Business Center. That was 6, sorry. Definitely a cage rattler. So, well, fine. I'm going to send it to Reagan. We're glad to have you here, Reagan.
Yeah, glad to be here. Let's see, who am I? I am a licensing officer for Tech Transfer. And then what is critical to the success of my ecosystem is money. I'm going to pop it over to Eric.
And I'm unmuted already. Oh, fantastic. 5 words or less. bringing together organizations that haven't met before. Didn't make it. I will hand it off to, let's see, Jen.
Awesome. I am Jen McDonald. I have been developing an entrepreneurship program at Mount Royal University up in Canada for the last 6 years. Also just got my master's in economic development last year, so that was kind of fun to merge entrepreneurship and ec dev. Most important piece for me is building a community of trust and interdependencies or connections. Does that make sense? Probably not. It's a very busy time of year, but yeah, a community with trust and openness and willingness to connect.
And who do you want to popcorn?
Right. Sorry, guys. Meeks?
Hey everyone, I'm an ecosystem builder and researcher in Louisiana. 4 words: stakeholder, cooperation, and collaboration, which is what we've heard.
Nice. Popcorn. Pass the ball to someone, Mike.
Valto. Who's left? Any? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm the last one. Maybe I'm not sure. Oh, let's see. All right. So hi, I'm Valto. I'm an ecosystem builder in looking from a global perspective. So basically helping ecosystem builders to build ecosystems. And what I would say from the past 6 months, getting commitment from multiple stakeholders to establish open standards for growth initiative. Do we have anyone left that hasn't gone yet?
We have Aaron, Christina, and Eli.
All right, Erin, off to you.
All right, let's see. Hi, I don't know what we're doing, so I can guess. My name is Erin Baca. I am technically the program manager at 49th State Angel Fund, which is a venture capital or a fund of funds run under the municipality of Anchorage. Also an ecosystem builder, and I heard something about 5 words. What am I doing here in 5 words? What are
so in 5 words, what would you say is
ecosystem?
most critical to success?
Gosh, I really liked interdependency. I think Alaska is lucky in that we have some really truly innovative, resilient people who can, this is more than 5 words, sorry, who can learn from the experiences and expertise of the lower 48, as we tend to be a little bit behind trend. So I'm here to learn from you all on how to build the best ecosystem possible. And I'm going to choose Cecilia.
Well, thank you, Erin. I'm Cecilia Wessinger. I'm your support person for these ESHIP goal calls and head cheerleader. So, one thing that I did in my local ecosystem, which is Tulsa, Oklahoma, and within this community is I convene the stakeholders. So bringing people together to talk about interdependence and learning that you cannot build trust and collaboration by talking about trust and collaboration. You actually need to do work together. So that's longer than 5 words, but there you have it. Christina.
Yes, hi, I'm Cristina Fernandez. I work at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, running the research and policy initiatives. And in 5 words or less, I think for ecosystem success, we need very clearly defined goals for each initiative, and then keeping track of those goals, so KPIs. I think that's what's holding most ecosystems back. And even in the midst of all the investment in public programs, there's little clarity as to exactly what they want to achieve. And so clear KPIs, I would say. And I think we're done with all the intros, right?
Yeah, except for Eli. So I'd be curious to hear what he has to say. And then does somebody want to introduce Eli? And then he can answer the question and talk about what he's going to talk about. I'm looking to my ESHIP champions to introduce.
Well, I'm the only
I'm the best introduction. I'm used to introduce myself, but Norris, maybe you can do it.
Well, I want to see if I tell the truth or not. That I, like many of these things, you run into people sort of randomly. Like, what the bleep is? I start a blink that's like, of all the good URLs been taken, and I got in touch and talked about this group and some of the other things that are going on out there. And I think he answered yes before I finished the question. It's a little creepy, but I hadn't even hit send, and he was responding. He's been involved in. He can tell you more about Startup Blink, but he's like our last month presenter. He's kind of in the business of evaluating ecosystems at the community level. And he has a different approach than Genome and some of the others. And he has graciously volunteered to speak to us. So we're continuing our theme of international presence here after Balto and Alistair. So Eli, if I have badly butchered your introduction, sorry. That way you'll have to tell them the real story. Anyway, Eli, we are so happy to have you here. And so what's your 5 words?
Super. My 5 words would be uncovering truth about startup ecosystems in a nutshell.
Uncovering truth. It doesn't involve aliens, does it?
No, it basically involves the perception that we all have about startup ecosystems that are from stories and so on. And I'm really interested to arrive with a data-oriented approach and kind of say, the king is naked. It's not what we think it is. It's not such a successful ecosystem, or this is actually an ecosystem that you should look at that in regular circumstances you wouldn't. So that's more the focus.
Terrific. So I think it is, we haven't had anybody else chime on, so we've got all 11 people on this call. This is actually a down month for us. We've had as many as 26, I think, on the call at one time. Eric or Chad, would you like to introduce Eli? He is sort of our victim. I mean, our speaker for this event. Do either of you want to lead off?
Sure, I can. Just by way of introduction, and again, Eli, feel free to fill in the blanks, but when you look at ecosystems, one of the big things that people ask is who's in it, what do we do, and also how are we positioned compared to other people. So one of the things that Startup Blink does is it presents a global view on who's who in an ecosystem and a bit of an indication on where that ecosystem is in relative terms to others as far as density, using different integration approaches with the likes of Crunchbase and a few other platforms, and also then engaging with local stakeholders to help report on what's happening in their ecosystem. So I believe birthed out of Israel, then launching across the world, currently in majority of countries across the US, engaging with everybody from governments to universities to local builders, setting up local meetups in order to engage communities to see where we're positioned, both within our community and globally. How'd it go, Eli?
Wow, I need to hire you to do my presentations. This is like, I can really see my sales calls making a lot more conversions. So thanks for that. Thanks, Chad. Really good one.
So over to you. If you could maybe just share a little bit about what what you have in mind, and yeah, what you're seeing out there in the world with kind of a bit of a global view on ecosystem mapping.
Yes, so basically one of the things that we do and we take pride of is the 1000 approach. So instead of just ranking the top 20 or the top 30, we believe that those 20 or 30 are relatively known, especially the top 20. But most people are not really thinking about moving to San Francisco. They have a much more limited scope of, let's say, I'm now in I have to decide now between Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. And that's basically it. That's where I can go. So the idea is that what we are very much obsessed of is kind of give you the tools to figure out if it's Vilnius or Tallinn, if it's Riga or Warsaw, Wrocław, and so on. So this is just as a side note, one of the things that we really enjoy doing, and that's the scope of what we do is basically 1000 cities. 100 countries. So I'll just do a quick introduction. It's basically global. Norris, is there an option to share my screen here? I think I can somehow. Just
Celia should be able to give you control.
Actually,
I can.
Okay.
I can go ahead and make you host so you can share.
I think I maybe can be able to share even. Oh, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Ah, super. Okay, so it works. So just for the quick intro about what's going on here. Basically, global startup ecosystem app, 70,000 startups, co-working spaces, accelerators, working with Crunchbase, SimilarWeb, SEMrush, Meetup, lots of companies to kind of aggregate and do additions on top of their information. Communities, it's important for us. We have about 30 meetup groups, and we're trying to connect with the entrepreneurs because actually I'm trying to research ecosystems, but without actually being connected to the startups themselves. I have a very big missing piece of the puzzle. So I'm always trying to speak with entrepreneurs. This is critical because their challenges and whatever they're facing is the key to understand how ecosystems are operating. That's why we kept the meetups alive, and we do a lot of online pitching events and networking events and so on. And this is how it looks like, the rankings. So you can see over here that there are about 1000 cities. You can search by country and so on. And the beauty is that you can go a little bit deeper. So let's say if I'm an entrepreneur in Germany, I want to know only the cities in Germany. So over here, you have a really nice list. I don't think it's accurate. I think it's relatively accurate, or that's why when I have to kind of share the main weakness of usually when I speak with people about what we do, they tell me, but yeah, it's not a complete set of data. You don't have all the startups in the world. What we've discovered is that just by having this sample, it's enough to actually do comparative analysis. It would probably not be the most accurate thing, but it would position Stuttgart above Dresden, let's say. And this thing is being updated every April. The next report is coming up really soon. So we're already working on that, and it's always exciting to see how the results are changing. I know that you care about data, so let me just elaborate for a second about how the algorithm is built. Total score, which is the aggregate of those 3 columns that you see over here. Each one of those are the big baskets: quantity score, quality score, and business score. And the idea is that you see over here about 25 moving pieces in the same formula that are giving you those results. And yeah, that's a little bit about that. I am kind of wondering if, yeah, we are, as Chad mentioned, working with a few dozens of governments, municipalities, and so on the development of their ecosystem, specifically on the promotion of the ecosystem. We're not shy to say, by the way, that an ecosystem is a product. And we truly believe that each product has to be marketed, and an ecosystem has to be heavily marketed because the perception of the ecosystem really influences the reality as well. So that's something that interesting. There is so much psychology. I think this is the biggest lesson that I've learned from ecosystem development. The amount of psychology that is involved here is massive. And we also do consulting, and we do mapping, basically supplying ecosystem developers with technology to map their ecosystem. And just to tap on this, I'll just say that many of the ecosystem developers that we speak with, I think they find it very difficult to develop the ecosystem because they don't really know what they've got in the ecosystem. In many cases, we arrive to ecosystems and people are telling us, we're not sure actually what are the best startups. We don't even know how many there are or in which vertical they are. By the way, I totally recommend for this kind of work, there is Startup Commons. Valto is here, and they're probably the most advanced, let's say, mapping solution, not as a map, but as an ability to actually visualize an ecosystem and kind of connect the dots. So their work is absolutely impressive. And I've been in a conference recently in Slush, and they showcased it, and it was something that I was really impressed by. And yeah, basically what we do, the main vision is a decision-making tool for entrepreneurs on where to relocate. As a side effect, investors and decision makers are also making decisions based on those rankings to kind of decide where to invest as well. So our best case scenario is when we see a startup relocate based on this. We truly believe that if your ecosystem is underperforming, you should not stay in the ecosystem. And that's something that we're always pushing the entrepreneurs to understand that the world is big. You don't have to get stuck where you are. Yeah, that's a little bit of, let's say, about what we do.
I'm the one who always screws up the mute button. So what has been the surprising thing? I don't want you to bury the lead. What is one thing you have found to be a powerful factor in support of growing ecosystems that we can actually measure somehow? And what's the most surprising negative predictor, if you will, of ecosystems?
It's a good one. I guess the most important thing is the private sector and the mindset, psychology, as I mentioned before. I think this is the most relevant thing. If you have the mindset in the right place, you don't need a lot more. For example, what we have going on in Israel now, it's a great example of two economies. One very much focused on startups and innovation. The other, the public sector, very much focused on low productivity and nothing else. And still, considering that the private sector is so vibrant, it's pretty amazing what people can do from their basements, without a lot more. By developing small networks that are basically from the private sector. So that's the most powerful thing that I've seen in ecosystems is basically the entrepreneurs themselves. Negatively, the most surprising thing that I was sure is gonna boost and actually is not boosting the ecosystem is public sector involvement on the micro. So I think this is one of the explanations of why the European startup ecosystem is underperforming. There is simply too much help. And this too much help creates a situation of zombie startups, basically startups that should not exist and exist only because of support that is being received by organizations. And for me, it's just a tragedy to see it. Wasted talent going on and moving on just because they get artificial oxygen from organizations that do not really understand the startup ecosystem and do not really understand what it means to build a startup. It gets on my nerves, but at the same time, I'm happy for whoever is receiving those cash injections. I just think it's a waste of time. So.
Well, go ahead.
I would love to hear Valto and Christina chime in on that because we've got somebody who actually lives in Europe and working on it, and Christina who looks at it across the field. So would that be an option, Valto and Christina?
Yeah, sure. Happy to comment on that. Thanks, Eli, for the very kind words. So yeah, I can actually validate that point by Eli that public funding tends to be a problem, specifically at certain maturity levels of the ecosystem. So, for example, well, Finland and Helsinki that I know the best. There has been significant kind of evolution and development in that sector. But for example, in the very early maturity times of the startup ecosystems specifically, so the higher growth, higher risk perspective, there definitely is that type of a pattern where there's articles, several of them, about these zombies that they don't properly come to life, and they don't die properly. So they kind of left hanging. And then also there is it tends to impact more the native Finnish people starting companies than, for example, foreign people coming and receiving that, coming from another country and starting a startup in Finland. They still tend to grow. So this kind of international mindset by default, coming to another country and getting the same benefits actually doesn't hurt as much as it does hurt the kind of those that are Finnish people started. It tends to go away a little bit more when the ecosystem matures. There's more kind of understanding. There's also more of the private side investors pushing, even though they have a smaller stake in the companies. And it's kind of like the public money gets more of as an additional leverage instead of primary funding. And then that kind of evens the model in such way that as long as there are private investors involved, they tend to push the outcomes for their investments, even though it may be percentage like 30% of the entire funding round or such. And also, this is not European problem. Singapore has also quite a bit of reputation in this area. In the past, they have also gotten better, where they cut to the point that not many of the Singaporean companies grew out from Singapore. So when they hit the certain growth rate, oftentimes they kind of exited internally and started again. But these things are also related to the maturity of the ecosystem based on our observation and experience.
Christina?
Yeah, I would add that the presence of investment networks, angel investment networks, help, and the maturity of those networks are also driving how much investment there is, and in foreign startups that have moved into an ecosystem, as well as the local ones, and then also what foreign startups located in other countries. They're linked to the other sort of cross-border networks that they have. My colleague runs a global business angels network to help keep an eye on that and see what trends there are in that field. So I think that's also important to look into.
Hey, Michael Meeks had a question earlier, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit. And so, Eli, I saw on your board there were a couple of different things. What leads to the scores? And I was particularly interested in the qualitative scoring. Can you tell us a little bit more about what contributes to how you score these?
Yeah, so we can go one by one quickly. The quantity is basically answering the question of how many. I do want to say basically about the methodology. We are trying not to make assumptions on is something good or bad for the ecosystem. We just want to check the ecosystem as it is. So for example, immigration, is it good or bad? I don't know. Low cost of living, is it good or bad? I don't know. High talent quality, is it good or bad? I don't know. So the idea is that we're trying not to go into those assumptions because we don't have any model. By the way, Startup Genome, Norris, I know I've been your guest last month. They have a great model. They actually managed to go deeper and kind of try to understand and build a very comprehensive model about what is supporting an ecosystem and what is a negative effect. We don't know enough about ecosystems, I feel. We just work on the data that we've got. Quantity is basically how many startups, how many co-working, how many accelerators, how many meetups, lots of stuff. Quality is the regular stuff, which is basically, how many unicorns there are, how many big corporates there are, how many top VCs there are, and many other things as well. We also have integrations with our data partners to be in a situation that we can kind of analyze the quality of the sample data that we've got in each location to kind of define the quality of each location. So it's something we do, and it's greatly helpful. The business side is more, let's say it's the only place where we kind of stray away from what's happening in the ecosystem and try to find a few other indexes like the World Bank, R&D, the ability, internet speed, internet freedom, so a lot of things, and we just put it on one formula, click on enter, and just get the list of the 1,000. So that's a little bit about what we're trying to do.
And you got me fascinated on mobile fronts. One thing that I noticed people nodding their heads when you were talking about sort of the life cycle, the maturity of the ecosystem. I saw some heads nodding. So, you know, do you categorize ecosystems sort of by stage of maturity, or is it more continuous? Tell us how you address that.
I think one of the things I understood is that in each ecosystem that we go to, for example, I've been consulting to the Canary Islands ecosystem. I just came back from there happily. I went swimming every day. It was a tragedy to get pulled away. But and before that, I was in Cabo Verde, in Cape Verde, and I did consulting there. Each ecosystem is so weird and so unique with unique challenges, a totally different story, absolutely different challenges that I can't really categorize and say, okay, you're in this basket or in this basket. So what we're trying to do is the rankings. I do want to say something about rankings. Rankings can be toxic. We're aware of that. But I think that it's time to, as I mentioned before in my 5 words, I want to uncover truth. I want to be in a situation that people are making decisions on which ecosystem should they go to, because it's going to make a giant impact on their startup chances of success. So as for life cycles of ecosystems and so on, I think it's so chaotic that each ecosystem is so unique that I didn't really ever go there in the life cycle, and I'm not sure they have it. It's like an ecosystem for me is like a person, and each person is so different. So.
Could you categorize, if you're going to put them into boxes, could they be categorized by the sort of the dominant challenges that they face? That's one thing that might link some ecosystems that we otherwise wouldn't see as similar.
Yes, but at the same time, I think that at the end of the day, and that's something that I think rankings are good in this sense, is categorize them by the success. So everything is leading to either success or failure, which is basically the rankings. So the ranking sounds sensational and so on, but at the end of the day, it shows you the final result. So I'm saying, look, everything that leads to the final result is so messy that I don't even want to go there. But I'm interested in the final result. What do you get when you actually put all these chaotic components together and then say this ecosystem is successful because comparative to other ecosystems, it's ranked much higher. So that's basically the way that that I look at it. The world itself, according to our ranking, it's very clear that is one ecosystem that is a supernova. I honestly never think that anyone would ever come close to this ecosystem, which is basically San Francisco. This is an outstanding ecosystem, and our absolute numbers for the total score of San Francisco are so far away from the others. Then you have what I call Big Four in cities, which is basically New York, London, Boston, and Los Angeles. And they are in their league of their own. And then you see actually very, very close competition below that. But why exactly are those baskets existing and what happened in each of them? I don't know, they're so special, but it seems like you do have levels of ecosystem maturity, but then again, what's the common ground between them? I don't know, just their success, basically.
Well, I thank you. That is something that I think concerns a lot of people in this group on the ground, is that the rankings can be a little, get a little crazy. And we do have the issue of these, we've had increasing venture capital and angel dollar flow into, the Bay Area, Boston, New York, and Seattle, I think. And there's been actually lower investment, relatively speaking, certainly in the rest of the U.S. But to me, the life cycle thing seems to have some value that the genome folks like to believe that it's certainly that there are some broad sort of stages of it. They think you can tell well, you're clearly at the early stage and you're clearly in the transition phase and so on. So but it's good to hear that. One question that struck me is, it's sort of interesting. You were talking about the psychology of this. One person who's not on this call is actually doing her PhD research on essentially the psychology in ecosystems. Is different cities around the world, you can actually get their average tolerance for ambiguity, their average learned optimism, even their big 5 personality scores. And she thinks that, whether that's a precondition or it's something that's learned as they evolve. But if you say in terms of the psychology, what do you look for? What do you intuit as being important differentiators psychologically?
I think maybe it's even more social than psychological, how the social is influencing the psychological. So I guess the best example would be Israel. In Israel, if you go work for Facebook or Google and you're telling this to your friend, they'll tell you, okay, nice, happy for you, I guess. But it would have a sense of you're selling out a little bit, right? You're not like, this is not your dream. And when you're gonna actually announce, hey, I just left Facebook and now I'm doing an application with yo-yo bubbles on the screen, and that's gonna be, and then all your friends and your family are gonna say, wow, like, great, like we're totally with you. Do the same in Greece or Portugal. Get a job in Google and try to tell your family and friends that you're leaving Google for this yo-yo application with the bubbles on the screen. You're going to have very uncomfortable dinners with your family. So the idea is that I think that the social conceptions are greatly influencing the psychology of people. And in some locations, there is a lot more push for the population by your social circle to take more risks and to be more of an entrepreneur. In other locations, it's really not the case. And I think it's greatly influential.
That might relate to, Michael Meeks has a question. I know Valto has got some thoughts on this too. How do you describe how do you know whether an entrepreneurial ecosystem is mature? How would you say that? I mean, is it those kinds of connections happening naturally, or is it something else?
Because I don't really have a theoretical model of what makes it mature, as far as I'm concerned, it's mature if it's ranked high. So the idea is that, again, I'm going on the result side and I'm saying, you know what, you don't have to convince me that you're mature or not. Show me what you've got on the focus of what are the startups, how successful they are, how much of a dent they create in the world. Do you have the quantity, the quality, and the business environment to do it? And that's why I like the model, because the model is kind of saying, look, the world is so chaotic. The rankings that we in Startup Genome are doing and other organizations, the world is so chaotic, we're going to look at the end result. So in a way, it's kind of like escaping a little bit from trying to convince people why this is mature and why this is not mature, and just saying, look, it's simply more successful. And that's the way it is. So, yeah.
Valto, you had something on that?
Yeah. Valto wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I can share what the approach that we have. So first of all, I can say that there is no one model. When we talk about ecosystems, there is no one model. There's also kind of rationale that you have to have, that you need a model, some model, or you can choose to look at multiple models depending on what aspect it is that you need to look for. So our need and rationale for ecosystem development comes from what is the most kind of first fundamental is the maturity of the startups themselves. So that starts from because there's time before the startup is born, and then there's the time when they mature. So we have this startup development phases perspective. When we then started to do the helping the ecosystems to help them develop, we needed a similar approach where we can somehow map in a kind of a starting point and then different levels. And this is specific from the need of being able to develop the ecosystem. If you don't know if you are helping it to mature, then how do you know that the development activities are working or not? And the other part was that regardless of what it is and model used, we needed a way to know kind of where, when comparing multiple ecosystems, where one is in their mindset of development, and then compare them and to see familiar patterns. And then once we kind of came up with our own ability to assess, sometimes these are, when you do enough, you kind of get this kind of sense of things, and then you try to find where you can find a model that supports your thinking. And that's kind of the approach how we got to. Can I share my screen? Let's see. I can show a couple of slides if I can figure a way to share my screen.
Let me see. Can you do it?
Yes, I think. Let's see. Boom.
Okay.
Is it showing? Yeah. So basically then when we started to work on this, we found something that is kind of closest. As we know, big organizations can be similar to ecosystems, although they have differences as well, definitely, but they are kind of similarities. So there's this capability maturity model by Carnegie Mellon University. And basically this kind of gave this type of framework that fit to way we saw, specifically from the perspective of identifying and then understanding the concept of ecosystem, and then trying to use that to improve the conditions of the ecosystem. And then basically from here we kind of simplified something that is easier to communicate and created this type of simplified maturity ranking for our own needs, and ability to give feedback when, you know, people ask, when you see so many ecosystems, how do you compare us based on the data that you have collected here from different aspects and so forth. And then there's a description of each of these that we have created. And as such, this is ecosystem maturity from the perspective of ecosystem development. So it doesn't give the kind of the status of the entire ecosystem, but it gives the perspective of the maturity of those who are trying to develop it. So that's a difference. It's not the maturity of the ecosystem, but it's the maturity of those actors that are kind of the key actors collective, trying to develop it together, and what is their maturity level, if that makes sense.
Perfect. We're sort of running short on time here, so because we have one more thing we want to cover on the agenda. So, Eli, you get the stage for if there's anything you want to close with. How can we help you? How can you help us, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, first of all, I think what I need more than anything is feedback. I'm actually a little bit surprised by how much the rankings that we're doing are now being used as a benchmark tools by so many organizations and being mentioned by so much media, that sometimes I'm a little bit worried that like I'm thinking, how do I improve the accuracy here? Because apparently decisions are being taken on that. And to be honest, we're a startup. We're a very, very small startup. And I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of things that we're missing on the rankings, on the algorithm. I'm not good at mathematics, actually. I almost flunked mathematics, so I'm always a little bit worried about this. So if anyone wants to be in touch and kind of like, you know, kind of give advice about how to improve the methodology and so on, I would love to, especially since the next report is coming out in April. So any ideas would be welcome. And yeah, I'm just want to say that I'm using the work of others also for a little bit of sanity check. You know, everyone that does something that kind of compares ecosystem is for me a really good reason to look at and say, okay, how come, what did we get wrong? Or is there something here that we're missing? So I guess the feedback and the knowledge, of course, I have to say that I'm going to be very, very honest. We went into this field of rankings as a little bit of a gimmick. We kind of said, okay, we have a map. We have so many entities. Let's do a fun rankings without any knowledge of ecosystem development and without really interest. The interest only came up later. So for me, every time I'm in a forum like that, I can really learn a lot from things that I have not known, because it's not like I pushed its building of the rankings after I knew a lot about the ecosystems. It's now I'm learning about ecosystem development only after the rankings were created. So yeah.
Thank you, Eli. That was marvelous. We'll share your contact information with everyone, and thanks for your candor. We learn a lot on these calls, and we're grateful. And if you are asking for volunteers, I don't think that you may be careful what you wish for.
Excellent.
But there's some.
That's right. Do we have one last question from Michael, and then we can talk about project canvases?
We got another.
Let's see.
That's about. Is it? Do you have at least a partial list of the measures you're using that are publicly available?
Yes, so there is a report of 160 pages that is being published and is free to download. And over there in page 8 and sliding to page 9, if I'm not mistaken, is a description of the methodology. So
terrific.
Yeah, it's all there.
Terrific. And one of the subjective social norm Mike was mentioning, some of us are fond of the model of behavioral attentions, the theory of planned behavior. One of its key components is this our perception of what are the social norms around us supportive or not. So are you drawing from the theory of planned behavior, or is where did that come from? That was Michael's question.
Yeah, this is great. I wish I could, but the problem is that with all those soft evaluations, I can't really put them in a model that runs on thousands of cities and 100 countries or even more. So the idea is that everything that is objective or can kind of be, let's say everything that is subjective or can kind of be a little bit softer, I'm not using in the model. And that's exactly the approach of Startup Link. Instead of analyzing what are the reasons of why an ecosystem is successful or not and rank those, we're ranking the end result. So basically, we're really focused on hard statistics, on something that we can compare easily, which has a number which is the truth, let's say, or at least some kind of a comparative truth in a way. So all those things are important, but I don't know how to put them on a model for thousands of cities and 100 countries. So,
well, we might have some ideas for you. I'm not sure, don't guarantee they're good ideas, but it's something that sounds like a fascinating research challenge. So thank you again. We have about 15 minutes to do 15 minutes of stuff. You're welcome to hang out and sit in, and you're certainly welcome in any future calls. So should I throw Chad or Eric? Who is going to take the lead on the Canvas stuff?
I vote Eric.
Yeah, I vote Eric.
Well, I'm glad to be nominated in such a way because I don't have a great update on any of these, but I can certainly introduce the concept. So I put it in the chat window and also in the notes. Let's see, in the notes, I didn't do this yet, but basically there is a dashboard that has a lot of information about all of the different ESHIP goals and the various initiatives that fall under them. So I'll put that in the notes again, but it's already in the chat. And we've got 3 that have been identified. I think there may be another Canvas or so. And the way that we do that is there's a sort of a Canvas format that helps us basically helps format things so that folks can write down what the purpose of the different initiatives are, who needs to be involved, the resources that are necessary, and some of the next steps to make those kinds of things happen. So there's 3 that were identified early on as initiatives under our goal number 5, and those were 5.1, which is metrics, building a community of practice. This is part of that. There's also a repository of ecosystem building practices and case studies. And then finally, there was an ecosystem research conference. I believe a couple of those have made a little bit of progress, but does anyone on the call have any updates or information about the community practice piece, 5.1?
So let me just share with you another page on the dashboard. So under where it says, when you go to the community dashboard, I just added the link in there. Under project teams, there is a link for current project canvases. So anything that's been submitted by anybody who has filled out one of these. So the 5.1, the metrics community of practice was filled out by Alistair. And so it'll have Alistair's contact information and the project canvas. And then Norris has shared a couple of them. One of them actually preceded the time when we prioritized. So back in the day, just to give you a little bit of history, after the 2018 summit, or 2017 summit, the initial summit, there were ideas that were launched as to how we go about creating this field of ecosystem building. And there were 130 ideas that were proposed, some in varying forms of preparedness or notions, and some that were more fully baked. And from those came those 30 prioritized initiatives. So they had to be prioritized from something. And there was one initiative that wasn't counted as one of the prioritized, but was recognized as something that needed to be done. So that's where that other project canvas came from. Is that right, Norris? One of those earlier ideas.
Yes, well, you told us they were not murdered. They were buried. They were just had been ranked as lower priority. But I think this one was actually, well, at one point it was 5.4, then it was 5.5. But it probably speaks to 5.1, probably reasonably. The nice thing about the Canvas format is it nudges us to see where there are potential synergies elsewhere. So in each of the canvases in Goal 5, that they also have sort of interdependencies, if you will, with other ones. But yeah, it was something that had seemed, 5.5 had seemed very popular. So, and I never knew why it got deprioritized, but I understand how the making of the soup is pretty complicated. Well, Alistair Brett was the first one there. Celia, can you show Alistair's? I don't want to, it'd be nice to make sure people get a look at it, because they can get and look it up in more detail later, because it even has a cool name. So.
All right, so let me see if I can go ahead and share that on the
Amy,
and so what you can do is go in here, and then you can actually, you should be able to click on it.
Yeah.
Hang on. Let me minimize all of you. And if you click in that little box, you'll be able to see some of the things that were shared. So, so is that easier for everyone to see? And the format of this is basically as a project canvas would be for any kind of startup. So, so we try to include all of the information that you would normally see in other startup canvases. And so you've got the name, you've got the goal and the initiative. We talk about interdependencies with other goals or other initiatives. There's a description, a target market, value proposition, all of those things that you're very familiar with in the startup world. These are the current team members. Also in here, there's contact information, and then you'll see whether they're seeking new team members, and it's clicked on yes. And so you can reach out to Alistair. There's a phone number, an email address, and any additional notes. So any of these project canvases will have this kind of information on it. And and you can go through that. I think it's easier not to talk about Alistair's project when Alistair's not here, but if you have questions about Alistair's information, then please reach out. The other thing that you might want to do is, since Norris has included 2 of those project canvases and Norris is on the call, can you give us a very high level Reader's Digest condensed version of the 2 that you've shared?
Well, the 5.3, the ecosystem research conference, we had a lot of discussion on Goal 5 of these calls dating back a year or more. We had a lot of discussion with, we had a discussion of this at the last summit. And so the nice thing is that the people who did a hackathon campus on that actually confirmed what we would hope were true. We had a couple of beta versions of this already. Bringing together, the idea is to bring together the people with the great questions and the people with the ability and resources to answer those questions. That just Google Hilbert problems and you'll get sort of the sense, what are the really big burning questions facing the field? And bringing together the policymakers, bringing together the ecosystem builders, bringing together the scholars, and get them talking to each other in one setting. Last August, we had sort of the first version of that. We actually went to an academic conference and had a discussion. We're proposing to do that again this August. We're getting a lot of very interesting results so far. The nice thing about doing it on basically we're doing it on somebody else's dime when we're going, somebody else is setting this up, but I think we got a proof of concept on that. Our one ask, I think, for this year is perhaps, maybe at the ESHIP summit itself, we're going to have the mayors there. There's going to be a research boot camp for translational research. We're going to be a conference. Plus, I guess we're going to be there, barring coronavirus. That would be an opportunity to spend 2 or 3 hours having these conversations open and candidly among each other. And what we found last August was some great questions happened, some great research projects have been started. If you have any interest in that, give me a holler, because we're moving forward in that. Also, we have 2 requests for grant money and to support these events. I also got Alistair's canvas in front of a couple program officers at National Science Foundation, and I think they're going to really like, because they will know who Alistair is. The other one, the initiative formerly known as 5.5, what we'll call it a 5.1, is something that we've wanted to do for a long time. Is a large-scale survey of ecosystem builders that both to survey them and learn from them, but also give them requisite tools. The Canvas has a lot of number of models that are out there. Ideally, we can make this what they call a panel study, where we revisit the same people with the same questions at several points in time. That may be a bridge too far, given the volatile nature of our membership, but again, this is something where there is grant funding out there to support large-scale data collections. That the ideal is something like the National Federation of Independent Businesses has a 10,000 person database of people that they survey every month, and they were asking questions that the membership wants, but also questions that policymakers want to know, and people get in the habit of responding to these. McKinsey has one. We would like to, I think Eric put it best a year ago, December, is how do we get people in the habit of, the tough question is how do we get people to respond to the survey and without being too punitive, too directive on that. There were 3 questions that were asked in the registration of last year's summit. Have no idea what.
So let me, just because we're going to run out of time in a little bit. So I don't know where we sit on the questions that were asked. I can tell you about the next summit for all of you who are on the call. So the next ESHIP Summit will be June 29th to July 2nd. The Mayor's Conference on Entrepreneurship overlaps a little bit and the mayors get in on the 28th. I would look at the possibility of coming in on the 28th of June for those of you who are interested in maybe getting into the elbows deep in the work of all of this. So just keep that date kind of flexible. We're still in the planning phase, so nothing is set yet. But I just wanted to let you know all of that. There will be a request for presentations coming up a little bit in the next coming weeks. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. Pre-registration for those of you who have been to the ESHIP Summit will be coming out before the end of the month, and then open registration will start after that. Just so you know, we are really looking at the opportunity to come and work as a group. So we understand that ecosystem building is a team sport. You cannot build an ecosystem by yourself. So in those looking along that line, we would love for you to think about the ecosystem builders in your community who you would like to collaborate with to build the ecosystem and come together as a delegation. So think about the people who you like and the people who you want to work with. And also the people who are maybe a bit challenging, and introduce them to the notion of collaborative culture and bring them along as well. So think about that as we're going along, and hopefully by the time we have the next call, this will all be live, and we'll communicate all of that information. So if you're not in the Slack channel, please email or contact, and we will absolutely include you in the ESHIP Slack channel. I can forward it on a call, and then if anybody has any questions, so the eshipgoals@gmail.com, which is the one that we sent you the reminder on, is a good way to get in touch with me, who watches that ESHIP, the email all the time, as well as other people, are CC'd, our ESHIP champions, Chad, Valto, Eric, Norris, are CC'd on that, as well as Eli, who is your speaker on the call. And then my colleague Christine, who works with national resource providers. That email also is monitored occasionally by Christine, or will forward information. So that's a great way to get in touch with us. We're not here to be your gatekeepers. We're just here to assist you in getting connected. Michael, I will include you in the information for Slack. So I want to give you back the rest of your day. This call, just like every other call, will be uploaded and saved to the dashboard, which there is a link for in the email reminder that was sent out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and have a great rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Eli.
Everyone.
Special thanks.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.